going to do to prepare ourselves for that? One of the most important.
This morning, we received word that 552,000 tests have been performed and completed all across the United States. We want to thank the American Hospital Association and hospitals across the country that are just.
Rewind this back, man. There we go. Well, people automatically cut off when President Trump says something. So let's go to Vice President Pence. You know, because some people just can't overlook what the man, you know, who the man is or what he has to say, and just look at his staff, people around
today,
him.
we continue to move out on President Trump's directive to slow the spread with mitigation, to advance and expand testing across the country, and to work on the critical supplies that our healthcare workers in our nation needs. Today, the president convened the nation's governors, all of the states and
What's happening?
Territories, and reiterated to them that with FEMA in the lead, our approach is our response to the coronavirus in this country is locally executed, healthcare workers, local public health officials. It is state managed, and it is federally supported. We took the opportunity to thank all of the governors.
You heard that? He said state managed, federally supported. That means they managed at the state level.
Leadership and the partnership they forged with this administration. We were able to confirm that 10 major disaster declarations have been issued, most recently to New Jersey, North Carolina, Florida, Texas, and Illinois. We spoke to them about the importance of the economic recovery legislation that will come before the House of Representatives, we believe, tomorrow midday. And we're grateful for their efforts in working for that unanimous bipartisan vote in the United States Senate last night. In addition to direct payments for American families, the average family of four will receive a direct payment of some $3,400. They'll also receive payroll report. Many of the small businesses, even those restaurants that you just spoke about, will now be able to keep people on the payroll for a period of months, even if the restaurant or the business is not open. With the governors, though, we talked about the $150 billion in direct aid to the states, $100 billion in direct assistance to hospitals, and of course, the expansion of unemployment benefits to make sure that our states have the resources to meet the challenges that were so evident in those unemployment numbers this morning. On the subject of testing, pleased to report the testing is available in all 50 states. And in partnership with commercial labs across America, this morning we received word that 552,000 tests have been performed and completed all across the United States. We want to thank the American Hospital Association and hospitals across the country that are just now beginning to report in a fulsome way the results of those tests. And when the president signs the law tomorrow, it will actually be required by law. But as Dr. Birx and Dr. Fauci have explained many times at this podium, it's so important
payroll support,
that any hospital
hire
or
some
any
people real
lab
quick,
that's
man.
doing testing report back to the CDC and FEMA so we have full visibility to provide the president with the very best counsel.
I think
good news today on testing. Abbott Laboratories submitted to the FDA today.
I think V-Dub that, you know, this is a situation that is unlike any other, and so it needs to be looked at and seen with a discerning eye. So,
of a point of care test. This would be the kind of test where you could go to your doctor. You could get the test done there at your doctor and have the results in no more than 15 minutes.
Oh, wow.
Dr. Steve Hahn will be here tomorrow to talk about progress in evaluating Abbott Laboratories' point of care test. Also, speaking of the FDA, on the subject of swabs, the FDA did announce earlier this week that testing symptomatic patients by swabbing from the front of the nose is perfectly appropriate, and it's already begun across the country. It allows for self-collection, and it also relieves the burden on healthcare protection. It saves personal protective equipment from being expended when people can administer a test themselves. And Dr. Birx will speak about the importance and the availability of swabs. With regard to supplies, you heard the president speak about what we have already shipped out from the National Strategic Stockpile, more than 9 million N95 masks for healthcare workers, 20 million surgical masks, 6,000 ventilators, and millions of gloves and gowns and face shields. In addition to that, we are working with a number of suppliers to manufacture ventilators, even while we work with state leaders to assess not just what ventilators are available in their state hospitals, but what ventilators are available in private hospitals across their state. And governors across the country are doing great work evaluating the full supply of tens of thousands of ventilators that are available. Let me also say thank you to the American Society of Anesthesiologists and Dr. Mary Peterson. The American Society of Anesthesiologists actually produced a video. Tomorrow they will host a webinar for healthcare workers to demonstrate how the devices that anesthesiologists use can be very easily converted into a ventilator that's appropriate for a patient struggling with respiratory ailment like the coronavirus. And we're very grateful. This actually adds tens of thousands of devices to the supply. And we're all truly grateful to Dr. Peterson and
y'all
the
crazy, man.
association for their
y'all
full
crazy. We eat boogers.
With 5 of 10
What up,
counties
y'all?
in the country being
What's
the
going
top
on?
counties for coronavirus being in the New York City metropolitan area, let us
Check this out, though.
reiterate our recommendation.
Let's do something else, man. I'm gonna play
Any
something else before you
resident
leave.
of the greater New
Check
York
this out.
City area who has traveled
Check this out, man.
elsewhere
This
in
is
the United States,
straight from the Uncle Sugar
please check your
archives.
temperature,
Check it
mind
out,
your
y'all.
health, and self.
Check this out. Brand new from Uncle Sugar, Blerd Planet. Let's check it out, y'all.
We don't give a shit about black news. We don't really give a shit, because if we did, we will be talking about real economic wealth building.
Which way did he go, George? Which way did he go?
We are the Blerd. That's dope. That's flying them up, man. Oh, we gotta play it again, man.
Give a shit about black news. We don't really give a shit, because if we did, we will be talking about real economic wealth building. We don't give a shit about black news. We don't really give a shit, because if we did, we will be talking about real economic wealth building.
Which way did he go, George? Which way did he go?
That's dope, man. People hating on us already, man. They hate. All right, let's go back to the president, man.
Statistics for something like that, like if
So this is what I was wanting to play, man. Hold on. This is what I heard, man. Check this out.
Combating the coronavirus and its spread, we grow more confident every day that this too shall pass with the cooperation and generosity and prayers of the American people. I just know that we will slow the spread, we will protect our most vulnerable, and we will heal our land. And now for information on the latest on data and what we're seeing, Dr. Deborah Burks.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Vice
This
President.
is what I like what
So
she said,
just
man.
as a summary of where it looks domestically, I won't talk so much about the global issues at this time. We do have 19 out of our 50 states, to be reminded, that had early cases, but have persistently low level of cases. And at
19
this
out of
point have
50
less than
states.
200 cases. So that's almost 40% of the country with extraordinarily low numbers. And they are testing. Some of our governors have been very adamant about their need for test kits. We have gotten them test kits. When we had Abbott add about a week ago to the test kits, we've been able to open up additional test kits for states that want to do surveillance and want to do contact tracing. These 19 states are doing still active containment. They're at 200 cases, despite the fact that they've been measuring them over the last 3 to 4 weeks. Still, though, 55% of all cases and 55% of all new cases continue out of the New York metro area. That's the New Jersey part and New York part in particular. I haven't added in Connecticut or other counties at this point. We are concerned about certain counties that look like they're having a more rapid increase. When you look at Wayne County in Michigan and you look at Cook County in Chicago. So we have integrated all of our information to not only look at where the cases are today, but how they're moving. So we can alert FEMA to where we think the next potential hotspot is. All of the counties that I've mentioned, the hotspots are in urban areas or in the communities that serve that urban area. And I think that's something very important to remember as we move forward. Because of the innovation within our private sector, we continue to have these new platforms added for laboratory testing. And these become critical platforms for states that have very low rates and very low rates needed to test. Why is that important? Some of these machines have wells and plastic plates that in order to be effective, you have to put on about almost 96 samples. And others are made for 4 samples or 24 samples at a time. So what's critical for us to be able to do is to match the need to the county and state. And that's the role that we can provide advice on, because we get to see across the whole country and where those items are needed most. And so this is allowing us to adapt and adopt really allocation of tests or recommendations to state of what piece of equipment they may need. Of the 550,000 tests, you can do the math, but we're still running somewhere about 14% overall. That means 86% of the people with significant symptoms, because remember, you had to have a fever and symptoms to get tested at this point. So still 86% are negative. These are really important facts for the American people. I'm sure many of you saw the recent report out of the UK about them adjusting completely their needs. This is really quite important. If you remember, that was the report that said there would be 500,000 deaths in the UK and 2.2 million deaths in the United States. They've adjusted that number in the UK to 20,000. So 500,000
Look at that.
to 20,000. We're looking into this in great
500,000
detail
to 20,000.
understand that adjustment.
Come on, man.
I'm going to
Come
say
on
something
now.
that's a little bit complicated,
It's not
but I'm going to
complicated.
try to do it in a way that we can all understand it together. In the model, either you have to have a large group of people who are asymptomatic, who've never presented for any test, in order to have the kind of numbers.
That's why reading and math is so fundamental.
To get to 60 million people infected. or of 6 million people infected. You have to have a large group of asymptomatics because in no country to date have we seen an attack rate over 1 in 1,000. So either we're only measuring the tip of the iceberg of the symptomatic cases, and underneath it are a large group of people. So we're working very hard to get that antibody test because that's a good way to figure out who are all these people under here and do they exist.
Yeah.
Or we have the transmission completely wrong. So these are the things we're looking at because the predictions of the models don't match the reality on the ground in either China, South Korea, or Italy.
You know what she said? The predictions of the models
We are
do
about
not
5
match the
times
reality on the ground that they've seen already. And this is the hot spot. This is the asshole of it right here, China.
for any test in order to have the kind of numbers that were predicted to get to 60 million people infected or of 6 million people infected. You have to have a large group of asymptomatics because in no country to date have we seen an attack rate over 1 in 1,000. So either we're only measuring the tip of the iceberg of the symptomatic cases and underneath it are a large group of people. So we're working very hard to get that antibody test because that's a good way to figure out who are all these people under here and do they exist. Or we have the transmission completely wrong. So these are the things we're looking at because the predictions of the models don't match the reality on the ground in either China, South Korea, or Italy.
The prediction of the models don't match
We are
reality on
about
the
5
ground.
times the size of Italy. So
No, I don't.
if
I
we
think it's
were
blown out of
Italy and you
proportion.
did all those divisions,
Listen to
Italy
this,
should
listen to
have
this.
close to 400,000 deaths. They're not close to achieving that. So these are the kinds of things we're trying to understand. Models are models. We're adapting now to the reality. There's enough data now of the real experience with the coronavirus on the ground to really make these predictions much more sound. So when people start talking about 20% of a population getting infected, it's very scary. But we don't have data that matches that based on the experience. And then finally, the situation about ventilators. We were reassured
this.
and meeting with our colleagues in New York that there are still ICU beds remaining.
Now, I'm telling you that Cuomo has an agenda. He is trying to run for president in 2024. He has an agenda.
And there's still significant over 1,000 or 2,000 ventilators that have not been utilized yet. Please, for the reassurance of people around the world, to wake up this morning and look at people talking about creating DNR situations, do not resuscitate situations for patients. There is no situation in the United States right now that warrants that kind of discussion. You can be thinking about it in a hospital. Certainly many hospitals talk about this on a daily basis, but to say that to the American people, to make the implication that when they need a hospital bed, it's not going to be there, or when
They're
they
gonna
need that
find out soon.
ventilator,
But this
it's
has
not
been like
going
the
to be
biggest
there.
fake
We don't
news
have an
thing ever,
evidence
man.
of that right now. And it's our job collectively to assure the American people that it's our collective job to make sure that doesn't happen. Right now, you can see these cases are concentrated in highly urban areas. There are other parts of the states that have lots of ventilators in other parts of New York State that don't have any infections right now. So we can be creative. We can meet the need by being responsive. But there's no model right now, no reality on the ground where we can see that 60 to 70% of Americans are going to get infected in the next 8 to 12 weeks. I just want to be clear about that. So we're adapting to the reality on the ground. We're looking at the models of how they can inform, but we also are learning very clearly from South Korea and from Italy and from Spain. Just to final, because I know many of you will look up my numbers.
The flu
The
still
only
got
people
way
who
more
are
bodies
over
already.
really 1 in 1,000 cases are people that have very small populations like Monaco and Liechtenstein. So you will see a different number coming from when your
I wonder
population
how many
is
babies were
really
aborted
large.
just last year.
One case can put you over 1 to 1,000 or 2 to 1,000. Thank you.
We'll do questions in a moment. Dr. Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. I'm going to change the topic just a little bit because there was a questions that came up and I've been asked about this on a couple of media interactions regarding the interventions that we're talking about. And
Good.
it's
Wash your
important because
hands,
it's
you
not
know,
something that I
cover
said
your mouth when you
yesterday
sneeze.
about
You
what
know
we
what I'm
would
saying?
likely see. Whenever you put the clamps down and shut things down, you do it for two reasons. You do it to prevent the further spread, as we call mitigation, but you also do it to buy yourself time to get better prepared for what might be a rebound. It may be a rebound that we get things really under control, and then you pull back, which ultimately we're going to have to do. Everybody in the world is going to have to do that. You're either going to get a rebound or it might cycle into the next season. So what are we going to do to prepare ourselves for that? One of the most important things is one that I mentioned several times from this podium, and that is to clarify a bit about the timeline for vaccines. And would that have any real impact on what we would call a rebound or what we would call a cycling in the season? Certainly, for sure, a vaccine is not going to help us now, next month, the month after. But as I mentioned to you, we went into a phase 1 trial, and I keep referring to one vaccine. There's more than one. There's a couple of handfuls of vaccines at different stages of development, but they're all following the same course. And the course is you first go into a phase 1 trial to see if it's safe, and you have very few people, 45 people within a certain age group, all healthy, none at really any great risk of getting infected. And the reason you do that, because you want to make sure that it's safe. Then the next thing you do, and that takes about 3 months, easily, maybe more. So that's going to bring us into the beginning or middle of the summer. Then you go to a phase 2 trial, or what we say 2-3, which means we're going to put a lot of people in there. Now, we hope that there aren't a lot of people getting infected, but it is likely there will be somewhere in the world where that's going on. So it's likely that we will get what's called an efficacy signal, and we will know whether or not it actually works. If in fact it does, we hope to rush it to be able to have some impact on recycling in the next season. And like I said, that could be a year to a year and a half. I'm not changing any of the dates that I mentioned. But one of the things that we are going to do that you need to understand that has been a stumbling block for previous development of vaccines, and that is even before you know something works, at risk, you have to start producing it. Because once you know it works, you can't say, great, it works. Now give me another 6 months to produce it. So we're working with a variety of companies to take that risk. We didn't take it with Zika. That's why, we have a nice Zika vaccine, but we don't have enough to do it because there's no Zika around. Same with SARS. So that's one of the things we're really going to push on, is to be able to have it ready if in fact it works. Now, the issue of safety, something that I want to make sure the American public understand. It's not only safety when you inject somebody and they get maybe an idiosyncratic reaction, they get a little allergic reaction, they get pain. There's safety associated. Does the vaccine make you worse? And there are diseases in which you vaccinate someone, they get infected with what you're trying to protect them with, and you actually enhance the infection. You can get a good feel for that in animal models. So that's going to be interspersed at the same time that we're testing. We're going to try and make sure we don't have enhancement. So the worst possible thing you could do is vaccinate somebody to prevent infection and actually make them worse. Next, and finally, with regard, I'll get you to your question. Finally, with regard to therapies. I mean, we keep getting asked about therapies. There's a whole menu of therapies that are going into clinical trial. As I've told you all, and I'll repeat it again, the best way to get the best drug as quickly as possible is to do a randomized controlled trial so that you know, is it safe and is it effective? If it's not effective, get it off the board and go to the next thing. If it is effective, get it out to the people that need it. So you're going to be hearing over the next month or more about different drugs that are going to go into these randomized controlled trials. And I feel confident knowing about what this virus is and what we can do with it, that we will have some sort of therapy that give at least a partial, if not a very good protection in preventing progression of disease. And we'll be back here talking about that a lot, I'm sure. Thank you.
Tony, you can take a question.
If I can just go back to what you're saying about this idea of risk in a drug manufacturer, are you saying that at some point in the phase 2 trials, that if you're seeing some form of efficacy, that you may try to convince a laboratory to spool up production at that point so that there's a risk?
Even before. When I go into phase 2, I'm going to find somebody that's going to make it. Well, partially the federal government, I think in some respects to de-risk it, but also investments by the companies. A lot of companies are not shy now about doing that. Usually when you do that at risk, John, you got to give some backup for them. And we've done that. We've put hundreds of millions of dollars into companies to try and make vaccines. I wouldn't hesitate to do that for a moment now.
On the county issue, talk about having low risk, medium risk, and high risk counties. Or for Dr. Burks, but there's no domestic travel restrictions. What's to prevent somebody from a high risk county going to a low risk county? Don't you risk creating a patchwork system, allowing more cases to slip through the cracks and the virus to spread in other areas of the country?
I think this is a very important concept, and it's why we've really worked on messaging to the American people about these 15 days to stop the spread. Because part of this will be the need to have highly responsible behavior between counties. And I think the American people can understand that they will understand where the virus is because we'll have the testing data and where it isn't, and make sure that they're taking appropriate precautions as they move in and out of spaces. I think this will be critical for our future as we work together to really understand where the virus is and where it isn't in real time.
Dr. Burks, let me just follow up on sort of your modeling. Everyone's talking about this Neil Ferguson study out of Imperial and how the modeling's changed. You last week said, or it was on Monday, that you talked about a serology test, something promising coming out of Singapore. Where are we on a serology test? The president said very quickly. And then is that what you need to do some sort of community survey so you can get to some of these X and Z's so you can figure this all out?
So we're talking to CDC right now. They are extraordinary in outbreaks and contact tracing. So they are going to be the workforce behind any new strategy that looks at counties that need to completely move into containment and surveillance and contact tracing. But part of what they're looking at now is where are these antibody assays? To be clear, there is antibody assays available right now, but they're by ELISA. And what we're trying to do is not just do ELISAs because they can use that now, but to be able to have point of care rapid diagnostics like we have with HIV, where you just get a drop of blood, you put it on a little cassette and it tells you if you're positive or negative. So that's what companies are working on. Yes, correct. That's the IgG to measure. Now remember, that's not going to be helpful in diagnosis. That's going to be helpful for us to know how many asymptomatic cases there are that or were.
How close are we to figuring out what the asymptomatic rates are? Because that seems to be the big question here.
It is a big question. It is a very big question. And so we have people, the FDA is working on that around the clock. They do have applications that are coming in. We put out a call for applications. I've been talking about it from this podium. If you have an IgG assay, rapid test, not an ELISA. I mean, you could do the ELISA today because the original SARS antigens react very well to the current COVID-19 antibodies that people have, but we're really working on that, both so that we could have therapeutics that could be plasma derived. So thank you. Yes, we're very much focused on that.
How soon will you be able to classify these counties? Because there's a lot of testing that has not been done yet.
Well, you know, there are states, and I just want to really recognize state and local health officials that behind all of this have continued to test and have continued to do surveillance. So we do have states that have been doing surveillance all along, who have been doing contact tracing all along. It never gets reported because it's not, it's not that exciting that they've identified 10 cases. But there are states doing that and have been doing it throughout this entire outbreak. And that's why we have some confidence that that testing has been going on. We have to expand testing for surveillance. But this is that, we talked about a little bit yesterday, the flu platform. So the flu platform is driven off of emergency rooms and hospitals reporting flu-like illness to their state and local governments.
Here's a fact check, man. Reuters, done by Reuters magazine. Was talking about they say Ebola, SARS, swine flu, and Zika all happened during the Obama administration. Nothing was canceled, suspended, and stock market was smooth sailing. Probably heard some people say that, man. Because Obama is apparently he was the shit, right? But This postal social media claims Ebola, SARS, and swine flu and Zika outbreaks happened when former President Barack Obama was in office, and that nothing was canceled, suspended, and the stock market was smooth sailing. This claim is partly false. Ebola. It is true that the 2014-2016 Ebola outbreak from West Africa coincided with Obama's presidency, but only 11 people were treated for Ebola in the U.S. during the 2014-2016 epidemic. Despite the limited scope of Ebola being within the U.S. stocks dropped more than 1% on October 1st, 2014, as the first diagnosis of Ebola in a patient in the United States spooked investors. On October 13th, 2014, Reuters reported that the S&P 500 dropped more than 1% and posted its worst three-day slide since November of 2011, following worries that the global economic weakness would dampen U.S. earnings, along with concern about the spread of Ebola. SARS affected 26 countries and led to over 8,000 cases in 2003. Did not coincide with the years of Obama's presidency, so we have to worry about SARS, period. That was a Bush thing. Swine flu. It is true that H1N1 pandemic, which occurred between 2009 and 2010, coincided with Obama's presidency. It is incorrect to say that nothing was consequently canceled, but the stock market was smooth sailing while this pandemic unfolded. According to the National Institute of Health, when the novel influenza H1N1 emerged suddenly in 2009, it was not surprising that over 726 K-12 schools in the United States closed. On May 2nd, 2009, President Obama, in his weekly address to the nation, reminded Americans of the CDC's recommendation that schools and child care facilities with confirmed cases of the virus close up for 14 days. Oh, look at that, man. Just so happens this has happened right around spring break. All right, for the first 5 months of the pandemic, which began in the U.S. in April 2009 and ended in August 2010, the U.S. was still in the midst of the Great Recession. And though the S&P 500 did grow 65% between March 9th and December 30th of 2009, you see, okay. Anyway, at the beginning of the H1N1 outbreak, U.S. stock index futures traded lower as worries linked to a global swine flu outbreak added to U.S. bank stress jitters here. There, boom. The same day, Reuters also reported that stocks worldwide and oil prices fell on fears that a possible flu pandemic could further weaken a global economy thrown into recession by a financial crisis. Okay. I don't know if I should keep reading this or not, man. I don't know, man. What's up, man? You still get a picture. What's up, Nene? Hey, y'all, so y'all want to see this, man? Check this out. Check this out. Check this out. This is straight out of the Uncle Sugar archives. It's the new thing for Blerd Planet. Let me show y'all. Whenever me and Council going, we're gonna play this before in the beginning. Ready? Here you go.
We don't give a shit about black news. We don't really give a shit, because if we did, we would be talking about real economic wealth building.
Which way does he go, George? Which way does he go?
So you two flagging me, man? Playing my own video, man? It's my own content, man. I really do. Come on, man. All right, y'all. Ha. Man, come on, dude. All right, man. Come on. There it is. Let's fly, man. If we play all the way through, you know what I'm saying? All right, y'all. Bunny.